Hello, welcome to Search with Sean, and this is part of the Chat with Sean series. You'll find all the videos somewhere pop up, but we've had some great chats with some amazing people this year, so it's definitely worth catching up on. And this one's going to be awesome as well, and it's the last one of the year, so hopefully it'll send us off with a bang. So yeah, just do some admin stuff, then we get into it as usual. But yeah, so to kick off, obviously, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I can't even keep up, I've got so much going on, but yesterday we did day one of Search with Sean Live, and it was like 4.5 hours streamed with 9 great speakers covering a whole range of topics. We had dealing with redundancy to image optimization to log file analysis. Literally, we covered so many topics, and we're doing it all again on Friday for day 2 of Search with Sean Live. But this will probably go out maybe the same time around Friday. So but if you don't catch it live, then obviously you can go back on the channel and re-watch the whole thing. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll be posting it. And we're probably going to do another one in January. Give me a break, I guess. And yeah, give you a break as well. And also recently we've done, as we usually do, SEO and AI news, quick fire news, just really quick shows, getting out all kind of some random stuff, but also the usual stuff like core update news and stuff. And that was covering 28 stories, and we've done that. That was last week. So if you want to catch up on that, I'm sure you'll find it in the description. And also the last chat I had was with Sarah Pokorná. Really great chat all around how psychology shapes SEO. Yeah, it's really interesting. I like going into those different topic areas. So yeah, definitely check that one out. And I'm sure I'll put a link somewhere. And heads up, the internet's been a bit, few gremlins in the system today. So if it does cut out from time to time, I might be able to edit it out, but if I don't, apologies. So yeah, let's get on to our great guest. I'm sure you know him. If you work in this space, I'm a big fan, follow a lot of his stuff, and always learn something. But I'll give you an introduction anyway. So today we've got Will Critchlow. He's a founder and CEO of SearchPilot, a platform that makes SEO testing faster and more accurate for large websites. Previously co-owned Distilled, launched the SearchLove conference series, and led innovations in SEO A/B testing. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Will. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. Looking forward to a chat.
Awesome. Yeah, we've got, obviously, as usual, we've got some topics laid out. But if we go down the rabbit hole, then it's fine. We may not cover everything, but I might be able to grab you back on at some point and cover the rest. And I'm sure loads more is going to happen. As we know, search is just like a crazy place right now. So I guess the best place to start is, in short, if you can describe basically what SearchPilot is and how it benefits the users of it. I guess that'd be a great place to go.
Yeah, so what we're fundamentally trying to do is prove the value of SEO. We really want to elevate SEO to the level of investment and I guess just taking it seriously that we see in other channels. And the way we do that is we power SEO testing for really big websites. So we work with some of the largest websites in the world, folks like Marks and Spencer. People in the UK will be familiar with. If we've got any US listeners, we work with people like Petco. So e-commerce is a big part of what we do. We also work with travel and real estate and various other verticals. But the thing is big websites. And so the kind of testing we're doing is looking at their scalable site sections. So if you think about e-commerce, that's product listing pages, product detail pages, categories, subcategories, product pages, those kind of things. And we're taking SEO hypotheses and running controlled tests to really measure the impact of those changes. And it's quite exciting to, it's the kind of thing, you mentioned my agency background. I kind of always wanted to be able to do this in the Distilled era, and it wasn't possible. So we built it, and that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, because I discussed it with other guests, but testing is like, when obviously we all know the environment right now with potential, the economy and layoffs, and departments basically, sometimes SEO is one of the first ones they look at, because they don't have those exact numbers like paid has, that can give you in black and white, and this is what this is, and doing testing can give you those concrete sort of answers, I guess, that we didn't have before. And I know you shared case studies before, and it's really, and obviously if people should, follow you in your emails and stuff, and they're really, really kind of good in terms of like, showing those examples, and every website's different as well, isn't it? So it's always important to test on your own website and not just use case studies from other sites. But I'm sure we'll get into that. So yeah, we're kind of obviously going on to that. Could you share some recent examples of surprising results you've had from SEO A/B testing? Any kind of ones that stand out to you?
Yeah, as you say, it does vary by website, and so I wouldn't necessarily claim that the results are some of the surprising results are specific to the website or the industry or the particular scenario in that situation. But some of the ones over the years that have surprised me most are, well, probably the all-time top one is the fact that restructuring HTML sometimes seems to make a difference, and I kind of feel like it shouldn't these days. If I was building a search engine, I wouldn't be that interested in how the actual HTML was structured. It's much more about the user experience and the content on the page and so forth. But we've seen various cases of moving content higher up the page, resulting in improvements, and moving it down the page, resulting in it drops. And probably the most concrete example of this is we've actually seen cases where, and sorry, when I talk about moving it on the page, I'm talking about in the raw HTML, but then displaying it to the user in the same place. And so I don't feel like that should make a difference. Some of the ones that are less surprising like that, a common test that we get asked to run is those e-commerce and retail sites. Is you think about the PLP, right? The product listing pages, some call them category pages, and there's a perennial discussion of how much content, how much text should be on that page, because you can go fully one direction and say it should just be a list of products, just be a load of photos, images, whatever. And a lot of sites have, they often even call SEO copy on those pages, totally written for search engines, not for users. We've seen a few cases where upgrading that content has made a difference, and that's quite nice to see. But we also see that there is still value in having that content there. So moving it above the fold, above the list of products and the images on that page has been beneficial. So that's probably less in the surprising direction of things. Some of the ones that are, I think, well, they've stopped surprising me now, but I think are perhaps most surprising at the industry level, are the fact that there's a huge variation in click-through rate, even in the same ranking position. And some of our most successful tests are actually ones that don't result in a change of rank or a change of ranking for new keywords or anything like that. They just have a better snippet, a better organic advert, essentially, in the search results, and get a better click-through rate as a result. And that shouldn't be surprising. If you think back, these days, a lot of paid search ads are automatically generated, but you think back, that was a whole person's job, multiple people's jobs in the early days of paid search, was to optimize the text ad that ran next to the search results. So we knew it was important in paid, but if you think about how often, or how rarely I should say, that comes up as a thing in the classic kind of SEO audit, or the conference circuit, or speaking, or whatever else, a lot of our most impactful tests are still ones that affect that search snippet.
Yeah, 100%. Even personally, won't go into it too much, but what I'm finding really interesting, we're doing a bit of a blanket sort of test in terms of like the metadata stuff, and each page is so different in the way it's experiencing these sort of experiments. It's so, like, obviously, that you think that this is why it's dangerous, I guess, to kind of go too far with like reading into different case studies of different people, and also doing blanket changes, because every page has its own sort of like DNA in a way, its own sort of like, you know, makeup of what it is. So, you know, it really does, you have to go that kind of, and what I found is just so interesting how they've kind of the results that are coming in. Yeah, it's just really interesting when you kind of play around with it. And I guess what I was going to say is like, because this is the question, obviously, isn't it? When you go to digital content teams, or you're having a squabble with the UX team about certain things that need to be there or don't need to be, how long do you run these tests? Like, that's usually the thing, you know, how many, like say you've got 3 stages in this test that you want to do, because you want to test different scenarios. How long do you play it, I guess? What's the kind of, is there a magic number or?
Well, so the way we run these tests is the length of time spits out from the analysis itself. So we can obviously have an estimation or a forecast of how long a test is going to run for, but then we actually run it until the Bayesian statistical analysis says the test is done. And we actually analyzed this recently and looked back across our kind of full set of tests. The average time to get to statistical significance is about 3 weeks, about 20 days. Basically. And so 2 or 3 weeks is a fairly good rule of thumb. If it's going to move the needle, it probably will move in that kind of time frame. What we find is if you try and run much, much longer experiments than that, the signal gets lost in the noise. You know, there's so much else that changes in that period of time that you stop comparing apples with apples, and you don't, it becomes very hard to draw statistically confident conclusions from them. But yeah, so that's our rule. The rule of thumb, or the kind of, you know, I guess data-driven version, is to say, well, that's what we see on average. But then for any given test, we're running until we either see it reach statistical confidence, and that spits out from the statistical analysis, or it's been running for a long time and it's stale and it's just going sideways, and we have to say, you know, that there's probably no impact here, or no measurable impact.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a very good, especially right, the data side of it, because, and also something you have to consider, I guess, is obviously seasonal patterns and things like that. If you're, you know, if there's a certain thing, it's always, that's the time of the year where traffic's going to spike anyway. It's a bit of an unfair test.
Well, that's why we run on really big site sections, because if you're trying to run a test on a single page or whatever else, then you're susceptible to all that kind of confounding data. When we look at a large site section, we're able to control for those effects, because most of those things affect the control group and the variant group of pages. So if you've got enough pages in the set, you can spot the seasonality and extract that out. And that counts for things like seasonality, but also Google algorithm updates, you know, things your competitors do, changing advertising that your company does, site-wide changes, you know, whatever it might be. There's a lot of effects that can come in and mess with your experiment, and we're trying to control for all of those things. And that's kind of core to our way of thinking about it. It is also worth noting that some of the tech that we've built around this is also designed for spotting those problems. So we call it outlier detection and outlier analysis. Is sometimes you'll find that a single page, even in a very, very large site section, has some crazy performance profile, and that can be because it hits the news for some reason, or there's some kind of viral story that takes that just picks up that one URL, that one product, or whatever it might be. So we pay attention to spotting those things, and then sometimes you can correct for it. So sometimes you can rerun the analysis without that page included, and other times you just have to know it happened, so that you can say, well, actually, we need to rerun that test. That data's too messy.
Yeah, that's a good tool to have, because that can definitely happen, can't it?
In predictable and unpredictable ways. Like sometimes it's, Mother's Day, and so you're like, that's coming, and that always drives some spike of certain pages on the website and not on others. I remember back in the very early days of building what became SearchPilot, we were analyzing data for a florist's website, and it's nuts when you see that whatever, like 90% of the roses they sell are in the run up to Valentine's Day, and X% of the total bouquets they sell are in the run up to Mother's Day. Those things are spikes that come along, and you kind of can anticipate that they happen every year. even if not on exactly the same day of the week. You can also, though, get the kind of totally unexpected ones. And we've seen that in travel, where a particular destination hits the news for good or bad reasons. Sometimes it can be bad reasons, and people aren't necessarily looking to travel there. They're just searching the destination, but it still pops up it still messes with your data. Or I remember some during COVID, we had one customer that sold masks, COVID masks. And obviously there were all kinds of spikes. Later on, they became more predictable, but at certain times there were spikes related to what the government was announcing, or those kinds of things that can mess with your data.
Yeah, and also we had an example of when obviously the king, members of the royal family got diagnosed with cancer, and then obviously certain pages started to spike, and obviously we had nothing that wasn't obviously seasonal or predicted or anything. So
totally news driven.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I'm getting knocks on the door and stuff, usual stuff that's going on.
Life happening around us.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, generally, obviously, I've been following a lot of your stuff and talks you've done. So recently, you've highlighted about title tags and internal linking as high impact SEO tests. Could you elaborate on how companies can prioritize these tests to maximize ROI?
Yes. Well, so I talked a little bit about titles are one of the things that fall into the bucket of tests that can affect the search snippet, like I was talking about before. So they're particularly impactful because they can affect both rankings and click-through rate. And there aren't that many tests that do both. So things like structured markup, schema data, for example, can affect click-through rate, but rarely affects rankings. Title tags can affect both. Internal linking is fascinating. They are, as I've said, commonly positive. Like they're some of the more impactful changes that we see. And I think that there's various mechanisms for that, right? Whether it's PageRank or whatever the successor to PageRank is, whether it's crawl depth, whether it's crawl priority, crawl speed, all those kind of factors. The title tags are probably easier to prioritize and think about in the abstract, because you can simply come up with a list of hypotheses, and however you want to prioritize them, whether it's off best practices, whether it's off survey data, whether it's off paid search data. There's lots of places that you can go to get a kind of a proxy for how likely you think they are to be beneficial. One of the problems with internal linking stuff is it's really hard to get your head around how internal linking works. And that's why we need to run the tests, actually. So with things like titles, you're often testing because humans are hard to predict. So will this get a better click-through rate than that? It's like more like a conversion rate test in many ways. You're kind of trying to predict the human mind, and of course that's hard to do. So that's why we have to run the real world experiment. Internal linking, you're kind of speaking just to the engines. You're just speaking to the crawler, but it's very mathematical. And I am the kind of person who does love geeking out over the algorithm beneath it. And I'm an old school SEO, so I would, if any folks newer to the industry have come along and haven't read like the original Anatomy of a Large Scale Hypertext, I forget the end of the name of that paper is, but basically that was the academic paper that launched Google. That was Page and Brin designing an analysis for how they thought the web worked and how it was interconnected and how links were powerful. And that was when they essentially invented PageRank. It's pretty accessible. It's not super mathematical, and it's very, very worth reading if people haven't. But what you realize is, although it's worth reading and it's easy to understand the concept, it's incredibly hard to hold in your head the effect of linking, adding, removing links, making pages, making your site more interconnected. Like, you just can't do that stuff in your head. And I've written about this a few times, but it just, even with a model, even if you imagine a 4-page website or something, you can't actually hold in your head the effect of those things. And so we're having to run the tests because of the complexity. And so I would say the way I would think about prioritizing those is more your classic, how much effort is this change going to be? So, and plot the kind of classic 2x2. How much effort do we think it is? How big a change do we think, how big do we think the magnitude of the impact could be? And that's obviously just an estimate. You're kind of guessing how many pages are affected, how prominent is the linking block, those kinds of things. The difficulty stems from the fact that some changes are quite straightforward. We're going to add a breadcrumb that links back up to the parent category or something. It's a very, very straightforward test. Whereas I remember one impactful one we ran actually for a local directory business. So the kind of website that has pages for every city, state, zip code type location area in the US. So you can imagine like immense site, and they wanted to introduce a concept of like nearest neighbors. So linking to geographic locations that are near to the page that you're on, so that you're looking at this page, but it's here's the regions all around this area. That's actually quite a hard algorithm to build. That the actual technology is not easy, and so in order to justify doing that, we had to design a much more small scale test that said, well, let's just do that for 100 regions, or I forget the numbers, but and try and build a proof of concept test that says, this is worth doing for the millions of pages, which involves actually building some kind of scaled up algorithm. So yeah, with title tags, I would turn to data like other usage data you can find, site search data, paid search data, survey data. Those kinds of things are great sources of prioritization. With internal linking tests and the more kind of complex tests, I would turn more to a kind of cost benefit type route. So, pick off the ones that are easier to test first, and any that you think you have a particularly strong hypothesis for.
Yeah, for sure. You got a good point with the proof of concept stuff as well. That's always important, because if the risk is that you roll it out, you're certain in your head that it's a good idea. You roll it out, the web developers take their time to do it, it goes through prioritization or however it works in your company, and it flops, and something messes up or whatever, and you go back again for another request, and it might not be as easy to get that one through. So
yeah, definitely. We see across everyone we work with, somewhere in the region of 80% of tests fail by that, right? Are not positive. And that's areas where we've obviously got a hypothesis, we've got a reason for making these changes, and yet still 4 out of 5 are either neutral or negative. And that is really impactful in a few ways. Obviously, there's the sifting for gold, like finding the good things, rolling those out. But there's actually a huge benefit in identifying the stuff that's not worth doing for a couple of reasons. One is building trust with your engineering and product team, so you're not constantly asking for things that don't turn out to have a big benefit. Side note, a lot of SEO changes are quite boring for engineering teams. You think about, can you put some more structured data on this page? Can you update the title tag again? Like they're not the most exciting. So if you can go to them with a business case, you can go to them and say, look, I know this isn't the most, you're not getting to play with AI here, but this is really important. This is an 8% uplift to our revenue generating pages. This is worth, however many $1 million. That they at least can get on board with doing some of that more boring work, because you've built up that trust. They understand the business case and the proof point is there. So yeah, we do a lot on that side of things as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the magic. If you could find that, because like you say, I do think they think it's a bit boring, especially the structured data.
They're not wrong. They're not wrong, but it can be boring and valuable. That's the thing.
But yeah, if you can build that business case, that could be the difference between getting it done or not, because they get that vision and they can see the benefit for the company. So for sure. So yeah, recently, well, I don't know recently it is, but you mentioned around paid search as a great way to test the waters for organic investment. Kind of touched upon it already, but how could teams better integrate strategies across paid and organic channels to maximize overall performance? I think this is something that's massively underutilized.
It's weird, isn't it?
So
yeah. I am constantly shocked, and I mean I have been now for almost 20 years, shocked at how siloed paid and organic search is in almost every organization I've ever worked with, and that's true agency side as well as in-house. And it's weird how you often have to go quite high up the organization before you find a single person who has oversight over both. and you've gone so high up the organization by that point that they're a general manager, right? They understand the P&L, they understand the finances, but they're not a channel practitioner. They don't necessarily understand the mechanics of either channel. And unfortunately for SEO, if they are going to understand one channel, the one they understand is paid, because if they've come up through either side, they'll have come up through the paid media side much more typically. Not necessarily paid search, but paid advertising in general. And that gives them the tools and the language and the mental model for understanding how paid works. So I would love to see way more collaboration here. I have seen some interesting. I had some very interesting conversations about this recently. So on the downside, we see a little bit of defensiveness and kind of turf protection sometimes. So one of the bad examples I saw was a case where the paid search team was actually kind of their power in the organization came from how big their spend was, and so anything that would reduce the amount they spent was seen by them as a bad thing, even if it was good for the business. And that is very challenging, because that ends up with them often overbidding on brand terms and kind of capturing that last click traffic that was going to convert anyway, if you see what I mean, or that was actually looking for the brand. And so we've seen resistance in some cases to running the combined experiment that says, hey, let's experiment with making this change, and our hope is that it's net positive across the total of organic and paid, because you're getting more traffic in total, you're paying an efficient, effective amount for it. And that has run into some roadblocks in some organizations, because what if it means we have to spend less on paid? That's bad for somebody's career, and that's always a challenging thing in a kind of political organization. The good version, though, is I'm seeing some very smart organizations, especially a lot of e-commerce and retail folks, talking about thinking about it much more holistically, and thinking about smart attribution models. So they're not just believing what the media platforms and media vendors are telling them in terms of conversion attribution. They're actually doing multi-click, kind of attribution, mixed modeling stuff. And when you start doing that, you start realizing those conversion journeys are super complex, right? It's not as simple as click on one thing and convert. Of course it's not. And so you actually need a lot of statistical techniques to take part in that. The thing that I think might come to pass, but hasn't yet, is when you look at how paid search has evolved. So when I first got into the industry, everything was very specific and manual, right? You were saying specifically what keywords you wanted to bid against, and specifically what adverts you wanted to run against those keywords, and specifically which pages you wanted that traffic to go to. That's got more and more blended into more of that stuff being done by the machines, and all the way through to PMax, Performance Max stuff, through to automatically generated adverts, through to different bidding strategies. I think there is a version where you end up having to run experiments in paid that look more like the kind of experiments we're doing in organic, actually, where you're not just experimenting with your bids and your ad copy, you're actually experimenting with your landing pages, not just in a conversion sense, but in a which one should appear for which query sense, much more like an organic model, actually. So, I mean, that's getting off into sci-fi. I'm not aware of anybody who's actually quite running those experiments just yet. The one I'm hoping that we'll get to run in the next year is some of that blended, run an experiment where the goal is total traffic measured across paid and organic. And if we can get more of that by reducing bidding in some areas and increasing bidding in other areas, and optimizing an organic landing page at the expense of this bit of the paid search campaign, and kind of bring that blend together, I'd love to run some more of those in the coming years.
Yeah, I think the key is, like you say, I think attribution of good, solid attribution model is going to be key, because I think when it's budgets, depends on the company, but budgets are really tight, people become defensive because they're concerned about spend, they're concerned about their jobs, their careers, as you say. And
they're not wrong. And everything's easier when things are going up and to the right. And if all channels are riding high, then that's great. I think this is another area where organic search, it's the same for everything. The biggest strength is the biggest weakness. The strength of organic being the fact that the clicks are free, right? The marginal click doesn't cost you anything. And the fact that if you cut your SEO investment, your SEO performance doesn't drop this month, this quarter, right? It means you'll do less well in the future, but it doesn't drop off in the same way that cutting 10% out of your paid search budget just instantly reduces the amount of paid search traffic you're getting. That's a strength and a weakness. That's why the channel is so beautiful and so wonderful, and you can build such incredible businesses off the back of it. The downside is, in tough times, it's very, very tempting to cut those kind of investments, and it's the classic capital expenditure versus operating expenditure. Like, it's the same reason that you businesses end up under investing in all their assets in tough times, and actually the smart ones are the ones that continue those investments even though they only pay off over the longer term.
Yeah, and that's where that, again, if like going back to the attribution model, if you have that education around the importance of reaching users all throughout the funnel and investing in the right places throughout the funnel, it might take a bit longer to convert some others, but you're going to reach a wider net, a wider amount of people than you are now. And then you can then attribute it towards whatever channels down the line. But if you don't have that, if you're, like you say, you're running off data from the platforms or stuff, it's not necessarily telling you this information. And it's that kind of short-term sort of vision, I guess. They still got that viewpoint around, what organic is, and it's a very long time game and all that. And, I guess it's like an education piece, isn't it? Because I think that people, even in paid and social, they don't understand now the growing influence of those channels even further into the search results than it's ever been before. And that's organic social and paid social. I still don't think they understand, and how if we all work together, the impact you could have for the brand, the organization overall. So I think, maybe it's, but who is it? SEOs, I guess it is our problem to go and educate them around that. But it's an interesting one. And and what kind of, this is more of a general, like we're bouncing around a bit, but in terms of like what major trends do you see shaping the SEO landscape over the next year? Obviously, this is prediction time when everyone's putting their predictions forward, but if you had a crystal ball, what do you be saying it's going to look like?
I mean, I was talking just the other day about there are kind of multiple different effects. I mean, the obvious answer is AI, right? Like, what's AI going to do? AI is doing stuff to everybody's industry, but I think that there are probably three really interesting angles, and the ones that are getting the most airtime are not actually the ones I think that are going to be the most impactful over the kind of time horizon you're talking about there, kind of 6 to 12 months, what's going to change the most kind of thing. If I had to predict what the most noise is going to come from, it's going to be the AI chatbot stuff, right? The AI overviews, ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc. That's what we're going to hear most about, and that explosive growth is incredible. And I am an excited techno optimist user of these things, and definitely love the fact that we're living in very interesting times as far as that goes. But for the kind of spaces we work in, especially when you think e-commerce and retail and so forth, my suspicion is that this actually turns into firstly a sustaining innovation for Google. So I don't think that it's by any means the end of Google. People are predicting all kinds of doomsday scenarios for Google. I think a lot of this use is incremental on top of search. It reminds me very much of the early days of social, when, I don't know if you kind of remember, when would it have been, like 2008, 2009, explosive growth of Facebook newsfeed, explosive growth of Twitter, and everybody was saying, people might stop searching, right? They might just ask their friends, what's the best steak restaurant in London, instead of Googling for it. And it turned out that what happened was it was mainly additional, it was mainly incremental. Search carried on growing, and there was this extra layer of activity that happened on top. And I think something very similar is happening with the kind of chat side of AI technology. And there's some interesting data. I've only seen it hinted at. I haven't seen the actual raw data yet, but Rand Fishkin is now at SparkToro, but obviously SEO folks know from way back in his Moz days. He's been publishing all this data about clickstream information showing how people are actually using Google. And he suggested in a tweet or a LinkedIn message somewhere that he's seen data showing actually that click volumes are rising on Google. So I think that the explosive growth of things like ChatGPT are fascinating, interesting technologies that are not in any way a doomsday scenario for Google. The AI overview stuff is going to be very interesting, but I think it's going to have to result in a lot of clicks out from Google ultimately. Two reasons. One is, and again, I'm talking here a lot about e-commerce and retail. You've got to buy the damn thing somewhere, right? Google's not going to sell you the actual product. So at some point, you've got to get off Google. And secondly, just a very self-interested one, Google wants to make money from the paid clicks. And you can only sell paid clicks if you deliver organic clicks. If every click is paid, nobody clicks on the things. There's a kind of maximum percentage of all clicks that can be paid, I think. And I saw that, I've seen that argument play out in quite a few different spaces. Anyway, to actually answer the question, that's some stuff that I'm like, that's going to be a lot of noise. The really interesting stuff, the big trend, I think, is the fight over AI generated content. So not on search engines, but the powering websites with AI stuff. And I think this is, again, I'm a techno optimist. I think it's a good thing that we have these tools. We're seeing both strands. We're seeing some tests where increasing generation capabilities are resulting in better content and it's outperforming what websites had before. Because a lot of websites are covered in terrible boilerplate content, right? Don't think that everything is all, handwritten, bespoke, human-generated content. There's some really bad database-generated content out there. So if you can improve that, that's a good thing. And sometimes people are training this stuff off their proprietary data, and there's all kinds of opportunities for increasing the sum total of human knowledge through this kind of thing. There's also some really bad AI-generated content out there, and we're seeing probably the newest trend, actually, which is interesting, is 2 or 3 conversations I've had recently have been about big brands looking to increase the tone of voice in their content and micro copy. So how can we make our product listing pages, again, our category pages, have more of a tone of voice, have more information on there, more human written stuff, more things that actually have a perspective and aren't just generic. They're neither boilerplate nor just generic LLM output. So actually that's the newest trend that I've seen in that respect. And the final point that I'll make, I've been going on for a while about this, is the danger in this area, I think, is the poisoned well. What if too much of the internet is just crap? And, I say that as I know some of the people who write the internet, and the internet has never been this kind of haven of wonderful content throughout. But I think it's getting increasingly challenging for search engines, but I mean, for anybody's crawler, including the AI models, to figure out what's good. And they're falling back on relying on brand and scale. And so I think that's getting challenging for new startups. And it's also getting abused by big players who've existed and have that authority, but are not necessarily the best custodians of it. And I think this is a really big problem in the AI world. They're seeing that if you train your LLM on LLM generated content, the quality drops dramatically and quickly and dangerously. So it's probably a bigger problem for them, but I think it's a significant problem for Google, especially if they can't figure out a way through it that allows anybody new to break into any of these spaces. Ultimately, that's a path to a very slow, painful decline.
Yeah, we're seeing that, aren't we? It seems that we're seeing that with all the latest core updates, where they seem to go one way, revert, then go back.
They don't understand it themselves as well, though, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lack of serious thought, at least in the public-facing explanations of this stuff. Hopefully, there's some people thinking very deeply about this within Google, but they're certainly not exposing that thinking externally. And I think it's quite disingenuous to say that 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 they, at times it looks like they kind of portray it that they understand it, and here's the effect, and just create good content and think about your users and blah blah blah. I think most of that's just platitudes. I think they haven't done the hard work to actually understand what is the effect of some of these core updates, what has it done, and why has it done that. And I've been talking about this for a while, because if you could read the tea leaves coming 10 years ago, when you look back to the era of when Amit Singhal was still in charge of Google search, and he was kind of resisting the deep learning, as it was called then, what we these days call AI, in the core ranking models, because it's not debuggable, it's not understandable, it's not you can't kind of peer inside it and find out why it's doing what it's doing. It's just a little bit kind of computer says no, and when computer gets it wrong, it's very hard to debug and fix it. And I think that's what they're kind of, I was going to say, what they're reaping today. I'm not convinced it's actually bad for Google necessarily. It's bad for these small publishers for sure, but Google, I think, the unfortunate thing for the small publishers is that I don't think it makes a difference really to Google. It's a PR problem. It's not a user problem, and that's a shame. And maybe it's a long-term challenge, but it's not kind of the burning priority that it is when they call the code yellow or whatever because ChatGPT's got to 100 million users. Like that's a business problem. Whereas a few bloggers aren't as visible as they used to be. Might be bad for society, might be bad for the bloggers, but Google doesn't institutionally probably have the biggest reason to care about that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what I found interesting yesterday is, you probably saw it, but creators on YouTube, it's asking now if you're happy to turn on that it's going to start learning from video content around training the AI. So that was something they've introduced about YouTube.
And if you say no,
so
you're just training all of the other models that don't even ask, right? So I think there's some epic lawsuits coming, no doubt. And I think I was listening to a podcast the other day about the UK has some draft legislation coming about this that looks quite controversial in terms of removing certain copyright protection or like redefining copyright protection when it comes to training AI models, but then having some kind of commercial payoff or relationship. I'm not convinced creators are going to love the way that goes either. So yeah, I'd say I'm generally an optimist, and I certainly like technology, and I'm excited to see where we end up in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But I do think there are going to be some serious challenges along the way, and I just hope that we get a level of seriousness in the thinking about that, because too often it feels like we get laws written by people who don't understand the technology and technology written by people who don't care about the laws. So it would be nice if that stuff just got a little bit more joined up, and while they're at it, if they could get rid of the cookie pop-ups, that would be lovely.
Yeah, that's a great saying, actually. And I was going to say, because I've recently been in an industry meeting where we were discussing AI issues, actually, and what it means for the future, and just generally where the industry's going. And a lot of the so-called smaller websites were obviously saw drops in traffic, and there's been recent articles come out. We covered it in the news around, I think it's on Search Engine Journal, about the majority of internet traffic's going to just kind of like 18 different websites mainly. So that how that kind of what it's going to be interesting in the next year. Just like I can see it with AI overviews, with feature snippets, with the paid results. The amount of organic results are reducing on most searches. So how these so-called smaller websites are going to even exist to that degree in terms of being found, because it seems like you say a lot of times the bigger brands or the ones with the bigger sort of budgets, maybe for PR and other stuff, are going to reap the rewards.
I don't think it's just about scale. I think there's a kind of business model and content model element to it as well, that no matter how big you are, if your content is generic and easily replicated and not distinctive enough that people are going to seek it out specifically, then I'd be very worried about the future, even if that's a large organization today. And that I'm thinking there about even quite big affiliate sites, or some media sites that are just answering questions like what time's the Super Bowl. What's the argument that says that even ought to be a search result when it's the kind of question that a computer can just answer now? And so I think that's one axis, is like, even if you're big, you're not protected from this if your business model and content model isn't differentiated. The other side, though, is, again, back to the e-commerce thing. I think there's a space for smaller players. They just have to be playing the right game. And I think what we've seen is actually total clicks out from Google has continued growing year over year. And there was an interesting update from Sundar, the CEO at Alphabet, Google, whatever these days, who talked about how they actually saw more clicks out when they introduced AI overviews. And that's not necessarily that click-through rate goes up, it's that people do more searches. And the effect of that, I think, is huge for the long tail, for the smaller sites that are differentiated, that do have something people are looking for. I am, at the same time, though, really suspicious about the kind of love fest of Google and Reddit, for example. I think that's a very weird thing, and somebody made bank from the fact that incredible hockey stick growth happened around the time of the Reddit IPO. Like, that's just incredible that they're kind of pulling those levers at that time. I don't think that's sustainable, because it just turns Reddit into an attack vector. If Reddit's going to rank, then Reddit gets flooded with AI content, and you've got bots upvoting bots who wrote some bot content, and it's all being consumed by the bots. And where's even the space for the humans anymore? I don't know. It's, as I say, it's going to be interesting times. But I think the fundamental thing that I'm betting on as a business owner, entrepreneur in the space we're in, is the bet that we're kind of taking is there's all this interesting stuff that's going to happen, but fundamentally, people are going to continue to want to find the right products and services that they want in their lives, and that is searching, and they're going to do it somehow. And what we need to do is help people get to help the products and the brands and the retailers fulfill that need. And I think there's something hugely valuable about people finding the right things that they're looking for, which is what search has always been about. And if we can bring some science, some rigor, some proof points, some business models, business cases, and test results to that, then I think we end up in a place where ultimately more investment ends up happening into the user experience, because you can prove the value of it. And that's just good for all of us.
Yeah, and kind of what you touched on before is that the way people are searching is changing. Racer Deep talks about it all the time, but obviously that kind of different ways people are switching between different social, chat, GPT, whatever, to back to Google and switching. Even the other day we were watching Gladiator 2, and it was
Haven't
some
seen
weird.
it yet. Is it any good?
No spoilers, but I don't think it's nowhere near the first one. Yeah, but there are some weird monkey things basically, and we were like trying to work out if that would even be the case in those times. And so I googled it and weren't getting much. So then I went on ChatGPT and got a bit more information about it. So that's the kind of thing. And I guess people do it social, whether they go onto X or
I think it's really similar to the rise of social. It's also really similar to the original growth of the internet. If you remember, I don't know, you're probably a bit younger than me, but that kind of the original rise of the web, when it went from being a toy to being actually better than the Encyclopedia Britannica, or the kind of the books you had in your house. Like, I really remember that was my teenage years, basically. And that's that point where it reached that tipping point from being toy to being useful to being incredible. And the same with the rise of video content on the web, the rise of YouTube and the like, going from my washing machine door broke the other day. And the fact that you now can just find a video of somebody somewhere else in the world who's like, I've had this exact same problem and here's how you fix it. It's just mind-blowing compared to where we were even 10 or 15 years ago, never mind 20 or 30 years ago. And I love it. I think it's great. And the as I say, big fan of the progress of technology. And in many ways, I think it's kind of a bit of a fool's errand to think we can predict exactly where this stuff ends up. And that's why at the moment I'm kind of trying to stay focused on the two extremes. So on the really big picture, we're about that need for search, right? People are searching and they're going to want to continue searching. And we're not tied to that being Google. We're not tied to it being any particular medium. And in the short term, I'm not trying to guess where this is going to end up. We're following the data. And what we're seeing right now is there's some really interesting user behavior, like you say, and my own, as a searcher, my behavior is changing. I see how my kids are working. You see how your colleagues and co-workers are doing things. But what we're seeing in the data is Google is still the behemoth, and the lion's share of all clicks to websites, any website around the world, is Google. And for the kinds of needle moving work that we want to do, then improving Google traffic to product pages is going to pay the bills for some time to come, I suspect.
Yeah, I agree. I guess also another takeout that we've discussed on this channel many times, like not always putting your, all your eggs in one basket. Go where your audience is, and it's whether you're certain social platforms or whatever. If you experiment with paid or whatever, don't always just rely solely on one source of.
Once you've reached scale, I think, I would say to a startup, stay focused. But when we're talking somebody with product market fit in a large scaled industry, you've got to be looking for those opportunities wherever you can find them. I had a very interesting conversation with a sort of like global brand, like everybody listening to this has definitely heard of, and I was talking to the European head of SEO there. We were talking about what does it mean for a brand like that to invest in showing up in AI recommendations, because they already do, obviously, right? Like they're just such a category leader, a major player in the space. Like it's not even obvious if you wanted to invest in showing up in ChatGPT, like it's not even obvious like what that would even mean. Whereas when you think about the organic search space, although that's massive for them, it's probably still also their biggest opportunity, right? Doing another few percentage points better, that's tens of millions of dollars right there. And every time they can, if they're going to do $1 billion a year in organic search revenue, then as I say, for quite some time to come, doing better at that is going to massively dominate most of those other channels.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny when you see obviously certain people coming out with how to rank higher, how to get more seen in these LLM models, and I'm just like,
Well, I tell you what, it reminds me of the fun days of. I was never the black hat like SEO practitioner, was never my game, but I know plenty of people who've made tons of money exploiting the attack surface area of search. And there was definitely that era, and I would say it was, I don't know, like 2006-ish. I remember some really fascinating conference presentations around. So this is the point where like search is huge by that point. Obviously, it's a fraction of what it would be today, but it was still exploitable in certain niches. And so you'd have people who are ranking for those single massive keywords with a personal affiliate site, and like they put their kids through college. They some of them retired. They made serious money, but it didn't mean that was a kind of sustainable strategy that you'd be recommending to global Fortune 500 brand, right? They're different games. And I think it's probably LLMs are in that same space today. If you can exploit them for personal gain, you can probably retire off that. Does that mean it's what the Fortune 500 should be doing? No. Like, not only is it, are you risking all the PR backlash and everything else, but it wouldn't move the needle for them. The kind of, oh, I could make enough money for a single person to retire on isn't going to be exciting when you get to that kind of corporate scale.
Yeah, I mean, I've still seeing them all over LinkedIn about creating mass content using AI, seeing the growth of the traffic, and
well, I mean,
you know.
So also, I'm a cynical skeptic about this. I've talked about being a techno optimist, but when it comes to LinkedIn thought leader content, I think I'm probably the opposite. But I think two things are happening there. One is people are seeing results that are sugar highs. You know, they're easy come, easy go, right? Yes, sure, you took the snapshot of your analytics at just the right time before it kind of cratered catastrophically just afterwards. The other thing, of course, is they're selling picks and shovels in the gold rush. They're not out there looking for the gold themselves. What they want to do is sell their info product or their training course, or whatever else it might be. So they don't actually have to be long-term successful. They have to latch on to the current thing, whatever that might be, and sound interesting. I'm sure I could be accused of being a thought leader in certain spaces, and so I don't want to make it out like everybody who's creating content for LinkedIn is selling snake oil. But I think some of the stuff you're describing there is like, it either only worked temporarily or didn't even work at all, or like that people are doing experiments with this stuff. Some of them with genuine curiosity, and some their business model doesn't actually need it to be a sustainable win.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is how you sell it. I guess no one, like, we were all interested to see actually the impact it might have, but when you're trying to sell it like that's a great way to go for everyone should be doing it, you're missing out. That's the issue. I don't know how you're doing with time. If we've got a couple more, I can sneak in a couple more questions.
Good for a few more minutes. Yeah.
I'll just go over a few kind of more testing ones again. We'll go back to that. So in terms of like so what this would be a good one. What challenges do organizations face when implementing large scale SEO testing, especially across different departments?
I would say the root of this structure is always the data. So the organizations we work with who find this easiest are the ones who have good measurement that is shared across teams and crucially believed by the business as a whole, not just by the originating team. So the very best ones of these have stuff that comes from finance. And we see some of these kind of high performance organizations where the finance has a view on the value of an organic visitor on average. Obviously these things are always average, but finance is saying, no, it's worth this much to us when we get more visitors to these pages. And that is then a number that is trusted and believed, and you can build business cases off it, you can build test analysis off it, and you can build a whole testing program from it. And then people can look at it and go, that $20 million of value, we actually believe that's true because it came from finance, not from the SEO team. So the challenges come when that isn't in place, when everybody's using their own measurement, arguing about what it means, arguing about attribution, arguing about those kind of different things, or it's even just missing. And actually, I think, again, Google has a lot to answer for with the move from Universal Analytics to GA4, even GA360, the kind of paid for Universal Analytics. The transition to GA4 has not been smooth for a lot of organizations that I've spoken to, and it's really hampered it hampers everything, because measurement underpins so much of how good teams work. And I think we're seeing a lot of cases of missing data, misunderstood data, data that isn't trusted anymore, or where, because you don't have that kind of continuous timeline, you don't know what 2 years ago looked like in data that's comparable to today's data. So there's definite challenges in those kind of areas. I think then the other bit is probably just more an organizational dynamic of who do these teams report to and how well do they collaborate. And we see a lot of teams moving, SEO teams moving to sit and work more closely with product, especially testing teams. So one of our biggest retailer customers just actually moved the SEO testing team from marketing into product, and that makes it much easier to have dedicated engineers, dedicated product managers, and the iteration and cycle time and just the kinds of things that you're capable of building and testing improves in many cases. The flip side of that challenge is actually it moves you further away from paid search, which is never going to sit in product and always sits in the kind of marketing and media team. And so I'm kind of curious about some of the stuff we were talking earlier about trying to like figure out how you navigate those kind of things. But I think most dysfunction ultimately comes down to you ship the org chart, and if the senior leadership between those divisions collaborates well, then a kind of cross-functional team can do well. If not, then you're going to end up siloed and with politics and all the rest of it. And then you get down into the technical weeds, and the things that we find teams struggle to do on a technical basis with testing is everything from building good control and variant groups. So being able to determine at scale that this large set of pages is kind of statistically similar to this large set of pages and how we're going to roll those things out. Being able to roll out the experiments quickly. We find a lot of homegrown systems where people come to us saying, "Oh, we're running SEO testing. We ran 5 tests last year." Is kind of quite a common conversation, and we can tell them the story of folks who are doing 30 tests a month, and it's just a different scale. So kind of keeping track of that data on that scale and being able to run the not only roll out the test but run the analyses at pace and at scale is critical.
And just throw a spanner in the works. What about when this has come up in my career, when third-party companies are involved, agencies, so on? That becomes a bit of a more complex, like trying to get that collaboration, that insight sharing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, back in my agency days, you'd have those all agency kind of meetings that are you're adding every organization's politics into the mix at once, I guess, plus the fact that all the agencies are trying to steal each other's lunch a little bit. We see that we're a bit less susceptible to that these days. So we find that there's a number of vendors that we work really neatly alongside, whether it's a conversion rate testing, whether it's analytics vendors, those kinds of things, CDN that we integrate tightly with on the technical front. All of those tend to be very collaborative relationships because they're all win-win. We're not competitive with each other for time, resource, or budget, really, across any of those things. The interesting ones come when, for example, as you say, there's an agency in the mix. So if there's an SEO agency and there's an in-house SEO team, and then we're there powering the experimentation program, we've actually found that to be a very productive relationship. I think because we are kind of so technically embedded with the website and the engineering side of the platform for our customers, we're a conduit for the agency to get more done, but also to prove the value of their work. So we end up making them look good. I mean, as long as they are good, I guess. I think probably this is where the double-edged sword of SearchPilot is. If you're doing good work, then we help you prove it. If you're not doing good work, then we might help you prove that as well. But no, in general, we've found that it's just a good thing. Having more ideas in the hopper, having better ideation, having teams that are able to come from different diverse perspectives. So the in-house team understands the business intimately and intricately, but the agency team works with other brands, other websites, has done the deep dive into whatever it might be, the competitor research, keyword research, those kinds of things. We haven't typically got either of those perspectives, but we know testing, and we know the kind of tests that are working. We know the kinds of areas where there might be fertile ground to explore, and so actually that tends to be win-win. So we have pretty productive relationships in those kind of areas.
Fair enough. And yeah, I don't want to hold you too much more. That's one more question. So what question do you wish more people would ask about SEO testing or the future of search, or just generally more around testing, I guess?
That's a really I could interpret that question in a few different ways. So what do I wish they asked me? What do I wish they asked themselves? What do I wish they... So the thing that I'm most curious, that I want to learn most about, is when you think about the leadership level in these kind of bigger organizations. So you've got the kind of, think about the most senior person with an SEO title, right? Whether that's head of SEO, director of SEO, that kind of level title. They report to someone, right? Often a head of channels or a director of digital or that kind of thing. Depends on the organization. Sometimes they report into VP marketing, CMO, or into product. What I really want to know is that level, right? So the person into whom the most senior person with an SEO title reports, what do they most care about when it comes to SEO? Are they interested in why things work? Are they interested in what worked? Are they interested in things working better? Are they interested in understanding it more? Are they interested in, or is it just number go up? And that I'm having more and more of those conversations, but I'm fascinated that answer is not uniform, it seems. And yeah, so if everybody could ask their boss's boss that question and fire me an email, I'm pretty easy to find, and I'd love to hear the answers.
It's a great point. And if you work at any company, you really should know what the top boss wants, really, because when you're reporting in,
Yep.
you need to be showing the right stuff, obviously, because otherwise you'll be, in their eyes, wasting their time, and that's not a good look. So yeah, I guess just to wrap up, because I don't want to keep you too long, it's kind of what's coming up for SearchPilot. Any exciting news, any developments? Or
yeah, so we've got quite a few things that I'm quite excited about on the product side. So we've really been having this push with some of our big, as I say, retail and e-commerce customers. We've got some great stuff coming that's going to help us run more powerful tests in ways that they're specifically interested in. We on the more public facing side of things, we did a big piece of work earlier in the year to survey tons of SEOs and look at whether they could predict search results better than the AI could. And we've got the results of that coming in the new year. That's going to be fun to look forward to. And I'm just hoping to get out and about and give a lot more talks about all this data as we gather it. So if people want to follow along with those kind of things, as I say, I'm pretty easy to find. I'm just Will Critchlow on all the social platforms, and SearchPilot is just SearchPilot in all the places. So follow along in those places, and we'll update as we go.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll focus on that study in our news channel, episodes as well. And I'll put all your please, and I'll put all the links to your socials and stuff in the description so people can go and check those out. And I'll just finish off with saying thank you. I know obviously your time is very precious. You've got a lot going on, so I really appreciate you jumping on today. And thank you again.
It's been really fun to chat. Thanks for inviting me on, and Merry Christmas to you and to all your listeners.